Hi, Simon. Good afternoon to all our attendees. Thank you for showing up today. We know it's the end of the year, so we weren't quite sure where everyone's headspace would be. I see there's a couple of familiar names there, Marguerite, Nick, Megan. I've seen you in one or two of the other webinars. So, and to the rest of you, welcome. We're hoping we can share something interesting, but also a little bit entertaining and not too serious, just give you some ideas. So just to kick off the session, and how we came up with this particular topic is, particularly in the last 2 years, we found that the online space has become incredibly saturated. There is so much content out there. And one of the big things is, how do you stand out and how do you capture people's attention? It really is tricky. And we have been testing and experimenting with various different formats. So today we just wanted to share with you what has been some of the things that have been working for us. We've had some other interesting experiments that haven't gone according to plan, but I guess that's how you create new pathways. And we know that content really needs to be something that people can feel is actionable, is relatable. And how do you do it? And I think you go back to that foundation to say, what motivates a person? What makes them want to partake? What makes them captivated and resonant with a piece of content? And we do know that there are 3 core underlying motivators, amongst others, but 3 core ones that we can really tap into. And we've based our webinar on these 3 core motivators and the actual mechanics that we've used. So you probably can all know about these. The first one being achievement. So we all love seeing some type of progress. The second one is social. We are inherently social by nature. So teamwork, seeing other participants and learners gives us motivation. And then the third one is immersion, which is a really interesting one. And I guess there's so many facets to it. But immersion is really about discovery. It's about role play. It's about customization. There's a bit of escapism. You probably saw a little bit in the start of this webinar. We're going to draw you in with the story and sound. So there's a bit of escapism today. And we look at those 3 core motivators, and we found this very useful when we've designed. So today really is myself, Deirdre Jensen, Managing Director of Game to Change, creative thinker, experimenter, and my partner, Simon, who I'm going to hand over to introduce.
Hi, thank you, Deirdre. Yeah, so I am the creative engagement specialist here at G2C Learning. My main focus is obviously around creating learning that is both engaging, with immersive, and following those 3 motivating principles. And you'll see that throughout the rest of the presentation. But for those that didn't attend, or for those that maybe got the email, one of the things we ask people to do is to create an avatar. So I wonder if I can show it off to people. If anyone has created an avatar, what we've done is we've set up a Padlet board. So let me go and grab the link for you guys. But simply, if you go into chat, you can click on the Padlet board or open up a web page. And we kind of want to see any avatars that you have created. There we go. Thank you, everyone, for linking that. Now, if you are busy or if you're busy listening to us and you want to think, well, where can I make these avatars? If you didn't get the email, that is all okay. You can put us in the background if you want, but you can click on the link that I sent as well, which will let you make the avatar. But I think we can take a look at maybe some of the ones that we've created, and we'll talk a bit more about avatars in a few moments. But let's see if people, we already have 3, I think. Well, I know. So if you are on Padlet, all you have to do is drag and drop your avatar image onto the Padlet board. You just have to search up a location, and then you can click publish and it'll pop up. So there's me. And we forgot to add that we also have Rihanna. Rihanna is going to be doing the narration for us as we go through this learning journey. And then
Rihanna's in Pretoria. I need to find my Padlet. So we've so those are just some of our avatars. There's someone in Ferndale. Yeah, hello. Let's
Fantastic. So yeah, we'll leave this on in the background. If you want to create an avatar and stick it up, that'll be pretty cool. And we'll maybe return to it a bit later on. But let's take a look now at the agenda for today. So we're going to be covering 4 things, but namely it's going to be the 3 key aspects. So we're going to start our exploration, exploring fairly typical fantasy island. But then we're going to go into learner customization. We're going to talk a bit about customizing your journey for your learner, as well as, well, making an avatar or letting them choose an avatar for them. We're going to also then go into learner progression and choice, which factors into achievement. This idea of giving learners learning they're doing, also the path in which they take through the journey. And then finally, we have some game design principles or gamification principles that we commonly use in our learning journeys. And we want to share them with you and give you a bit more insight to that. So for now, let's start with our adventure.
As the storm subsides, you take a walk out onto the deck. The smell of the sea and the salt is stronger than ever. As your eyes readjust to a clear sky, you notice a strange island in the distance. Could this be the Golden Atoll? As the island comes into focus, you're pretty sure this isn't on any map.
So here we go. We're already setting the scene for this learning journey. We're doing a bit of a strange one, this fantasy island.
As the ship makes its way closer to the island, you begin to see it more clearly. Palm trees dot the foot of the beach and give way to a dense jungle. There seems to be a line of rocky formations that block off the center of the island. The ship weighs anchor just offshore.
Okay, so we know we're on a ship, and obviously our first goal will be to get to that island. And immediately what we have is a choice here. So we're talking about avatars, and this is an avatar choice system within the learning journey. So we have a few explorers here. We have Justine, we have Case, we have Elliot, and we have Cordelia. So now that you have an idea, when you're choosing an avatar, it's going to be who represents you in this learning journey. And maybe some of them have pros and cons. Maybe some of them, if you really want to get into more gamified systems, maybe some of them have statistics and some may be better than others. Elliot, for example, has a map, so maybe he'll be able to find a better path through the island. Who knows? But I'd love to hear from you guys. If you want to put into chat, who do you think you would want to be as an explorer going into this island? Deirdre?
I'm going with Case because he's got that cup there, and I'm very intrigued by what might be in that cup. It might be something strong because it's end of the year. So that's my choice. But I think the nice thing about an avatar is there's a bit of immersion. So there's a little bit of role play here. I think it is always nice if you can take on someone else for an experience.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be a copy paste.
His choice.
Well,
I see no one's brave enough to volunteer, but we presume you've all found one that appeals to you.
So that's the thing. It doesn't have to be a direct representation of you, like 1-to-1 ratio. For me, I'm thinking, well, I like Elliot also because of the map. But my problem with Elliot also is he has a large bag with him, and I'm worried that that's going to slow him down. So I'm actually going to go with Cordelia because she has a backpack and I think she's got enough to be well prepared for it. So let's click on her and choose her.
Not wasting any time, you grab the nearest dinghy and make for the island, hoping to discover what secrets this island holds.
Okay, and then we have our first bit. Let's get going to this island. So that was essentially an avatar system that you can put into your learning journey. Now we're doing this all on PowerPoint, and we normally would use something like Storyline to achieve this process, maybe make things a bit more smoother, maybe add a few more functionalities. But I think let's talk more about this kind of idea of personalization and then also the avatar system. So personalization really is giving your learners a choice in how they're represented in this learning journey. And we're doing this because expression is a powerful tool. Being able to put yourself into a journey immediately gives you ownership of this journey that you're going into. And people want to have a presence in things. Otherwise, essentially, it is just going to be a book that you're reading because you could maybe put yourself into the characters that are there, but rather you want to be a character that's going to be in that journey.
And I think that's where you can also, if you can bring an element of personalization, it does help with that ownership.
Yeah, and a big thing is when you're starting out the learning journey, it's obviously very intimidating. You're trying to get your learner on board. And so by giving them a choice of an avatar, in this case, we're immediately giving them ownership of the journey, but it's also the first major thing they have to deal with. But it's not a difficult thing, but it means they have to have some level of interaction into the experience. And by, again, giving them an avatar or letting them customize that journey a bit, it becomes their journey. It's no longer just something you send out to blanket all the learners, it becomes their learning experience. And potentially, if they choose an avatar, in this case, they care about what happens to their avatar. You know, if they take a wrong step or something terrible happens to them, that feels more impactful because they were the one that chose to be expressed like that. So I'm talking a little bit about avatars, I'm talking a bit about customization, and I want to make it clear that when I talk about an avatar, it doesn't necessarily have to be a person that is how you are represented. You could customize many things. It could be customizing maybe the look and feel of the journey. Maybe instead of island adventure, maybe you get to let the players choose if they want to go to island, or maybe they want to go to maybe like a snowy landscape instead, giving them maybe a bit of choice in how they take the adventure. Also, it doesn't have to be a person. It could be like what car you choose. I mean, I did one a long time ago, a learning journey a long time ago, where the player, or the learner in this case, got to choose what expression best represents them. So they would be able to choose between honesty and compassion or truth. And that was a great way of giving them a bit of personalization to their journey. And of course, we're obviously talking this in the framework of gamification, right? And that obviously draws inspiration from games. And in games, we have these examples of an avatar system. The Witcher, for example, uses an inventory system where you can pick and choose what army you have, and that changes the way Geralt the Witcher actually performs in battle. You also have something like XCOM 2, a really favorite game of mine, where in this case you get to customize your soldiers before you send them into battle. And again, you immediately have the sense of ownership because it's my soldier that I made. So if something bad happens to them, so if they die in battle, that's doubly effective because it was something that they made. But the avatar system is really great and gives you something to expand upon. And again, just that representation. But another aspect to the avatar system which some people don't consider is the fact that you can have an avatar for a non-playable character in your game or a guide. So you could have a representation of, say, the teacher. You would have a teacher in the classroom. You can absolutely have a representation of the teacher in your learning journey. And obviously it doesn't have to look like the teacher. It can be framed in terms of the journey that you're creating. I'll show you an example in just a bit. But what's really nice about it is it creates that kind of direct link. All of a sudden you're represented in the journey through the avatar, and your guide is represented in the journey as well. And it creates this kind of conversational tone where you are talking to them, they're talking back to you, and you care about what happens to them because you know it's a representation of someone. And likewise, because you care about that person, because you care about your guide, and you care when they say, hey, you must go and collect that treasure chest over there, you feel like you have to because someone's telling you to do it. So it creates agency in the learning. So Deirdre, what was this one about?
This is just a really simple one. I mean, what we wanted to do, the content was not riveting. So we actually just had an avatar that they chose. And essentially we built it into the learning. So I think the big thing here is that the avatar creates a conversation with the learner. You can choose what that avatar looks like, and you can have some options. And that avatar also addresses you. So you put your name in, you can see here, and that avatar welcomes you through each part. So a very simple way of how we used avatar in this particular piece of learning.
And very quickly, you're immediately setting up that interactive point of putting your name in. It's asking you to do something, and you feel like you have to kind of comply with it because it's a very cute representation of a guide. But there's a couple more things we have to talk about. I think a big thing is also, where do we find these avatars? What should we be using for them? And also how in depth should we be taking these avatars?
Okay, so what I thought I'd do, and really this is just the practical, is what I've put together is just a consideration. So as you saw, we showed you various options of how you can build an avatar. So you can either use a photo. I mean, there's some great photo banks of avatars in different positions. You can have an illustrator, an illustration designed. You can also have a video which has some movement. And then if you really want to take it to the next level, is creating a sort of a 3D object, an HTML 3D object. And this is where you get closer to the actual game design. What I've actually done here, and when I did some of my research, is you'll see there's a rating from 1 to 5 in terms of when selecting your avatar, looking at, is it easily modified? So you can see here, if you have a photo, it's pretty easy. You can find different snapshots of that. A video is a lot harder. So we've got a couple of things like engagement and then interaction. Your 3D has more opportunity to be more engaging, to have different aspects to it. And then another consideration is time and resources. So obviously, if you have got a big budget and a lot of time, you'd love to do the 3D avatar, and you can bring that up. If you've got a lot of bandwidth, the 3D also works for you. But if you are sitting with restricted bandwidth and time and budget resources, you might want to look at something simpler like a photo. So this is just a really great tool for when you decide what type of avatar do you want to use for your project. We will actually share this with you and send this as a link after the session so you can reference it. This is something I wanted to show you, something that we did in Storyline. What we had a gamified experience, and we designed 4 particular avatars. There's a slider key that you can use, and the learner actually chose on which character they wanted to play. So as soon as they picked the character then pulled through into the video and also into the actual e-learning. So that was one way where we could actually create some customization in the e-learning. So that's just an example, and it's very doable in Storyline.
And I mean, I think a big thing about this is when you're deciding to maybe use an avatar system, it's how frequently is the character portrayed throughout the journey that you're having. So in the example that we have here, this was actually a very key focal point, because every section afterwards, the character would be interacting with, say, a part, or be interacting with a PC, and you could see the character moving backwards and forwards. So a lot of time was spent on that, but it made that link, or that link between the learner and the avatar even greater.
So these are just, and we'll also send a link through. These are some great apps and sites where you can actually build avatars. So I did some research and I found these the most interesting. I think the one that I wanted to mention is Voki. Voki is actually a web tool. You can build your avatar. And your avatar you can either use in a presentation, or you can use in a live session like this, where people actually become avatars. It's not an expensive licensing. I've given you the link there. So it's a great way of just bringing the avatar system into sessions. The other 3 are all on Android or iOS store where you can actually download and you can create them. We do some more detailed work in our learning engagement design where we show you how you can bring some of these into your actual storyline development. So obviously this is, there's a lot that you can go into it, and there's a bit of technicality sitting on some of these. But what we've done, just as sort of something for you to use, is we've got a link to our YouTube channel just on how to put an avatar in Storyline. And we've created the link there, and it just gives you the steps of how to do it and how to set it up, the simple steps of doing that. So please feel free to click on that link when you have a chance, and you can just learn how to do that if you don't already know it in Storyline. So Simon just shared in the chat.
This did so now. So you mentioned the learner engagement design course. What exactly is that?
So what we're doing is we're actually doing a 2-day session in the beginning of March. And we've actually created a two-tier program where we actually going into the detail, some of these into detail, where we've got more detail content. But what we are doing, and that's kind of the free version, the paid version, we're actually going to be coaching people through designing their actual learning adventure. So we're going to helping them troubleshoot, helping them set up avatars. We're going to do it both face-to-face, hopefully if everything's okay with the virus, but we'll also have an online. So we're doing it in a hybrid forum. We have sent a link there. So that's where we really go into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, so if you're busy, if you're like thinking about doing a learning journey now and you have the content, but you don't really know how to put it together, this is going to be a great opportunity for that. So you can start thinking about it now, sign up for it now, and then by the time this comes into fruition in the second quarter of next year, then we can work with you and kind of bring the realization to life. But that's excellent. So I think we talked enough about the avatar system. I think we want to move on and continue our adventure.
As you make your way past the beach, you quickly see a clearing in the palm trees. Looking around, you see a path that could take you to the mountain wall. But before you decide to follow the path, you can hear drums off in the distance.
And immediately we introduce to our first conundrum, which is, would you investigate the sound? So this is the second aspect that we want to talk about, and we're going to put in a bit. But essentially, choice is a very powerful tool. And if you're creating a learning journey, sometimes you want to give a few branching choices to your learner. So, and there could be pros and there could be cons. If you follow the route that you're taking towards the mountain, maybe that's going to get you somewhere quicker. But you could also lose some time if you're going to investigate the sound, but maybe the sound, this drum beat sound is important. Maybe it's going to help you along later in the journey. So it's again a matter of choice. I think I know what I would choose as a bit of a risk taker, and that would be to investigate the sound. So I'm going to say, yes, I would like to.
As you follow the sound, the drum beat keeps going. With a rush, you push past a few palm trees. As you move the last leaf out of the way, the drumming stops. You see a clearing with the masks laying about and a drum in the center.
Okay. And we're now presented with this more of the mystery of the island that's now unpacking itself to us. It's a bit strange, this kind of ghostly drum sound.
You try to pick up one of the masks on the ground, but it seems to be locked in place, and you struggle to lift it. You go to examine the drum. You notice the drum skin has marking on it. You make a note of it.
Okay, so let's take a look at that drum skin. So this is where you might be saying, well, Simon, where do I put my learning content into? And it's going to be up to you as how much you want to put in. Sometimes you can use the learning journey more as an assessment tool, where each time you come across a puzzle element, maybe that's the testing side of things. Or in this case, for example, maybe when you're investigating this drum, maybe it gives you a bit of that learning content that you have developed. So this could be a puzzle piece that we might have to use later for something. We don't know what the puzzle is, but it's best if we take it with us. And let's get back to the mountain path.
You manage to make your way back to the path, unsure what to make of the masks and drums. With the jungle behind you, you make your way to the foot of the mountain.
Okay. So this moves us into the second aspect, which is progression and choice for your learning journey. I spoke a bit about it, but choice is one of the most central gamification mechanics that you can make. It's taken directly from games. And the reason for that is because giving a person choice changes it from being a narrative story to one that the player, or the learner in this case, interacts with. And because of that, because they can interact with the story, it becomes more important for them. It's their choice. Likewise, it creates agency for the learner, because that's the way that the pros and cons of each path. And I know what you guys are saying is that, well, what happens if my learner takes one path and they miss out on a whole bunch of content? You can structure the choices in a way that's relevant to the journey, but doesn't exclude any of the content. And I'll show an example in just a bit. But I mean, moving back to games, you see it oftentimes where you have to decide on the consequences that you face. A lot of times, maybe dialogue, maybe you're doing a dialogue with your guide and you say the wrong thing to them, or you don't necessarily follow their direction. There needs to be consequences for what happens. So one of the main reasons why giving a learner choice works is because, again, they take ownership of that learning journey. Again, it's because it's their choice that they've made. Maybe other learners in the classroom, or maybe other learners online, took a completely different route, but maybe you all still got to the same ending. It's just a difference in the route that you took. So here's a good example of this. If we look at this kind of, from what we see, is it looks pretty linear, right? They start at the village, they go to the forest, and then they climb the peak of the mountain. And at each of those spots, they would get a piece of learning content, or maybe they'll get an assignment they have to fill it in, or a multiple choice question. It's up to you when you create your learning content. But you could give a choice where they have to decide on what mountain to climb first. It doesn't have to just be one mountain, where maybe the goal is they want to summit all 7 major mountains in the world. And they get to choose what mountains to go to, but at the end of the day, they still have to go to all 7 of them. So you can structure your choice in that way. There's other ways you... Yeah, does it?
Yeah. I also just wanted to bring in around choice is that often your choice is a decision point. And what we found, especially when you bring your sort of game elements and choice and learning design, is that your activities, or where you want someone to apply knowledge or skill, happens at your choice points. So I know that there's a question around how do you branch it out, and we'll answer it just now around the scenario-based mapping. But I just wanted to mention that.
That is a big one, but you can do choice in other ways. One of the things you can do is maybe the learner will choose as what learning style they want. So you can have one route that goes to your journey that's more focused towards written work. Maybe it's focused more towards just pure writing, while another learning style may accommodate for videos and webinars, for example. But again, you give the player the choice to decide on what path they want to take. And again, maybe they want to go an easy path with more content uploaded or upfronted, and someone would want to do the content more slowly and take a different path. It takes some work really mapping out these paths to make interesting choices and also to be relevant, but the impact is absolutely huge on the learner. So yeah, as Deirdre mentioned, one of the things we use is a story program called Twine. It's a free thing that you can download. And this is a great way of mapping out your branching scenarios if you're doing that sort of thing, or if you're trying to write a story that has multiple different routes you can take.
Yeah, so I think we've been delving quite a bit into scenarios and writing up scenarios. And my recommendation is start with something simple. It's always great to visualize it. I mean, there's a tool like Twine. You can also obviously do it on a wall and map out your points, and start with a simple route and then actually build on that. Because what we have seen, and even very simple like scenarios and stories can really get complicated and you can get yourself lost in it. So it is a little bit of experience, and the more you do it, the better you get. But I mean, one thing we are introducing, and we've done a set of interviews with a great scenario expert, Christy Tucker, and she gives some great advice, and we've also given the link to a website. And scenarios are a great way because they actually replicate sort of the choices in a game, and you can weave a story through that.
No,
great. So, Adriana, I see you've got some great feedback in terms of alignment with the interaction. So very important, because you also don't want cognitive overload. So the story and what you're asking people to learn needs to also flow, or you know, you almost get people overloaded with too much information. So good point.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. And the more you add on, the more, you know, this can quickly bubble and kind of explode if you don't have a tight control over your choice system. So that's why simple things like an avatar and your customization element, that's a very easy choice system. Maybe what route they take, like in our case, the jungle route, you still went back to the old route. So you still gave the illusion of choice, but you still have a very linear path. But yeah, we have done a webinar in the past of scenario-based learning. If you want to see more of that, that will be on our LinkedIn page. But I think now let's keep going with the journey.
At the foot of the mountain, you hear the sounds of mumbling and arguing. As you move forward, you see 3 masks floating overhead. They appear to be more focused on themselves than on you.
So now we've been introduced to our guides, or maybe these are characters that we can interact with. Maybe this is our first puzzle, but you can see how we slowly have kind of escalated the story and escalated the journey from simply going to this mysterious island to now we're pretty quickly seeing what mysteries this island has.
Eventually, one notices you. Finally, some help, you hear it say. Another mask pipes up. Can it save us? We've been cursed to live as masks by the island's guardian for disturbing its peace.
And I mean, if you get a bit more backlog, a bit more narrative where it's like, oh, an island guardian, maybe that's something we're going to have to defeat. Maybe the island guardian isn't an island guardian, but maybe it's like the final assignment or the final exam the learner would have to do.
The first mask continues. The guardian said if we solve a riddle it's been pondering, we could be set free. Help us figure it out, the third mask shouts.
And again, this is where you can start introducing your learning content, your assignment testing, where instead of a riddle that they have to solve, maybe it's assignment they have to pass to get the next puzzle piece.
Solve the riddle. At night I come without being fetched. By day, though lost, I'm not gone. All know me, but only the ocean heeds my call.
So I'm a big fan of games and I'm a big fan of riddles. So this is one I really like. I don't know if anyone in chat can figure it out, but one of the things you have to keep in mind is when you're building out these learning journeys, and Deirdre did speak about it before, is that you want to keep it relatively simple because you're combining the elements of both your learning content, and then you have your learners still having to think about all these extra steps during this kind of narrative journey. So you have to try to find the right balance of it. I think Megan Becker might have the right answer there. Well, one of the things you can also do if you're creating a learning journey is also have help points. So maybe you have your assignment here and your learner is a bit lost, but then you can say, hey, you know what, click on the help point. And this will maybe take them, if it's on LMS, I'm assuming, you can click the link and it'll take you to all the learning content that they need. So that way they can get help. But in this case, we have a few examples of a coffin, a magnifying glass, a moon, a snowflake, or an ant. So I think moon was definitely the correct answer there.
Well done, Megan. We'll have to give you a prize.
I feel like sometimes when I do those riddles, sometimes they're a bit easy and sometimes the first time I saw the video, I was easily stuck for about 10 minutes, just being like, wait, what could it be? And then it's really annoying. One of the things I really like about riddles, sorry, it's just a whole complete tangent. But one of the things I really like about riddles is just afterwards, once you know the answer, it feels so obvious. And you kind of feel a bit silly at the same time. But that's a really good example of just the idea of challenge that you want to introduce to a player. And we're going to expand a bit more about that when we go into our third key aspect, and that's knowing your design principles. So, or should I sidetrack and just answer Adriana's question quickly? So one of the things you have to keep in mind is how long do they do the journey for? You can easily break your journey up into different steps. So in this case, you saw that we have done 3 different segments for the learning journey. And so maybe on the first day, you give them the first section, they choose their avatar. The second day, you introduce them to the various pathways they can take. And then the third day, you give them maybe the first riddle. There definitely is a fear that sometimes your players or your learners won't enjoy the experience, but that's why we often do multiple rounds of testing for it.
Yeah, so I think that's a really relevant point, and this is the really tricky part. Is as we make more engaging content, we can sometimes get caught in all the nice stuff and the entertaining stuff, but we still have to create learning and some kind of change through the experience. So, I mean, the thing that we talk and we're going to go into now is really doing some player testing.
Yeah.
Because you can get a very good sense of how much people can take in and what you need to take out. So you might even put it into a very simple format, and you might even limit the amount of interactions, but you bring in more visuals and you bring in more sounds to create that immersive experience. So it's very, I wish there was a formula that you could get it right, but it is a kind of experiment, test, and get feedback.
And if you're using an LMS system, oftentimes what you can do is you can limit the learner's access to things until they have completed the journey or until they've completed the assignment. So you can do exactly the same thing here. But it kind of all comes back to these design principles that we normally use and we kind of want to share with everyone else. And the first major one is have a goal, but also make sure that the learners know what that goal is. So we haven't necessarily explained like, okay, I'm going into this mysterious island, I don't really know what to do. And only at the end do we kind of reveal that, oh no, you probably are going to have to defeat the island guardian as a goal. But there's a more overarching thing where it's like, we want you to be engaged with the learning. We want you to go through all the content. And that's the goal we're trying to set forward with this.
So it's always important. I think it's always important to put the objective and the outcomes. And if you do have a story, the story supports it. So we went for a very fantasy and we went for a bit of entertainment in this webinar, but often, I mean, we might have a far more serious tone and we might have a case study, and we use the case study story as our way of creating a more immersive experience. But it's always, one thing I've learned is it's always about the learning, and then the actual game and the story has to support that learning.
First and foremost, they need to know that they're doing this for learning, not necessarily for a story. That has to be kind of come second. So the next design aspect that we typically try and implement, which maybe doesn't always happen, is have failure states for your learners. And the reason for this is if you not have a way, I don't want to say punish the learner if they make a mistake, but oftentimes if you're having a story adventure like this, and there's no failure for doing something wrong, they can simply just keep clicking through it, getting to the learning they need to do, and then they're going to jump off. So oftentimes you have to have sort of some restriction in place that makes them think more about the choices they're making. So one of the things you could do, and this is a very, not a difficult thing to do, is maybe they keep going the wrong route and they keep ending up getting bitten by a snake and they lose a bit of their health each time. Or maybe they run out of time because they explored too much of the island and didn't get to the end. What you can do is say, hey, look, you have lost, but if you do this extra piece of learning content, we can restore that time, or we can give you back some of your hit points and give you a medical kit to help heal the snake bite. So you can actually use a failure point as a teaching method.
And I think the other thing is not to be afraid of using failure states, as long as someone can recoup and can get back. And if you do give the feedback, I think when we're looking at sort of the learners that we're dealing with now, they are very familiar with playing games. They're very familiar with that overcoming challenges. I think we can push this failure state a little bit more, and it doesn't always have to just be an easy exercise or the values lost in that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's worthwhile going through the content 2 or 3 times because you keep hitting these not roadblocks, but these failure states. But Duolingo is a very good example of how they've implemented kind of like a failure state, but then prompts you to try your best. So not only do you have this idea of like hotness, where if you every day you have to sign in and log on and do a bit more learning, otherwise you kind of lose your streak and you have to start all over again. So it kind of incentivizes you not to fail. So that is actually a really good way of doing a failure. But also other things where if you don't practice enough, it actually breaks certain topics, and then you have to go and redo them again as well. So it's changing the way you're learning so that you know if you don't keep on top of things, you could slip back. And obviously if you're doing languages, that's something that you can easily forget the next day. So it's an idea of creating repetition in that way. So the third one is apply skill and give feedbacks. And this is kind of 2 mixed together, where the first one is you want your players, or your learners in this case, to become better as they go through the journey. So they understand more of how the system's working. So they waste less time doing puzzles, but also they are becoming more knowledgeable as they go through this learning journey. So it has to become more challenging, the final step. So that's why in this case, the riddle at the start with the moon, oh, that's a very easy riddle. I knew that off by heart. But then once you get to the island guardian at the end, maybe you have to do like 4 or 5 really difficult challenges in order to beat them. So it's about giving your learners an opportunity to apply their skills. And likewise, when they apply their skills, we have to give them relevant feedback. So yes, that was the correct answer to the puzzle, or no, you didn't get the question right, or yes, you got the question right, and here's the reason why this is the right question. So many times I've seen where it's said, hey, yeah, that's the right question, let's move on, but it's not explaining why that's the right question, and you could have just easily guessed that it was the right question. So making sure the player or the learner knows what's happening is really important. Likewise, you saw with simple things where you click a button and all of a sudden the island zooms into perspective, or you click another button, all of a sudden you have this drum beat sound playing through. You're giving your learner feedback that their actions throughout this journey are going to matter. I think this is Deirdre's one to tackle.
Yeah, so I think it's as I said before, it's finding a story and finding an adventure that complements your learning. I think as it's come up before, it has to be seamless enough that it doesn't overload someone's thinking, that they lose what you want them to actually take in. Finding the right story and having that story support the learner. And starting simple. I mean, I think we're also learning continuously, and we're still learning day by day, and we still have moments of a couple of those moments where we get things right and we get things not so right. And I think even when you're doing branch scenario, it actually gets quite complex. So start with something simple and then build on from that. So even if you sort of put out a minimum viable adventure, test it out, get feedback and improve on that. It's a great way to get going.
Yeah, and again, one of the things is maybe you don't even have to have a theme kind of applied to it. Maybe if you're dealing in a medical space and you're doing medical training, have your journey in a hospital, make it something that's familiar to them, so they don't even have to digest the idea of this mysterious land, so to speak. And the final one is remember who you're designing for. This is, I think, kind of applies almost to everything from your goal to your failure state to skills and to keeping it simple, is that know who you're designing for, because that's the person that's going to essentially go through the journey. And if you have this weird thing where you're dealing with all these arty-farty and you have to make a picture and you have to sing a song to complete the journey, but then who you're training or who is going through the journey is these highly competitive lawyers, for example, there's going to be a complete disconnect between what you're asking them to do and what they should be learning. So always keep your learner in mind, because again, I'm different. I know Deirdre is different when it comes to learning. We learn in different styles, and that's why there's different learning styles out there.
So a really good little hack is, if you have got a sample group of your learners, is to ask them what movies they enjoy. What do they enjoy doing in terms of what type of games? And you'll get a pretty good idea of what appeals to them. And you probably find that from that, it's really easy to start designing and getting feedback.
Yeah, I really like what Jeffrey said about the Call of Duty thing. I definitely remember doing that in my youth. And that appeals to a certain type of learner, this idea of unlocking kind of collectibles as you go through. So maybe they go through the learning journey normally, but they get extra points for doing extra achievements. And at the end, they get a different reward. We actually go through this a bit more in our learner engagement design, because these are all kind of aspects of gamification that you can either have in your learning journey, or you might not want to because it doesn't fit your learner. And I mean, a great example of this is people are pretty different. Same message, just the undertone is very different depending on how that person writes it or who is writing it.
Yeah, so you might be a Star Trek or a Star Wars fan. You might fall into one of those two camps.
Let's not get too much into that point. But those are the 5 key, or the 5 design principles that we typically use. Those are the 3 key aspects that you can implement into your learning journey that will give you hopefully some level of engagement from your learners. But again, if you want more help, you're more than happy to kind of ask us. Deirdre, you're at deirdre@gametochange.co.za, correct?
That's correct.
So if anyone ever wants to email you, they're happy to do so. But yeah, I think we should go back and talk a bit more about the learner engagement design course. Let's have a little video playing that kind of maybe explains a bit more of it.
We've actually run this program over the last year, and we've had a couple of learners go through it, and we've designed with them projects. What we have learned, we've learned a lot from this actual program, is that we find people work really well in a little bit of a pressure cooker environment. So our whole idea around this is that give people 2 days and give them the content, and then get them to actually start applying, and we're there to support. We've got a couple of people who do some of the technical work and help with that, can coach around it, and also being in the environment of other learners sharing ideas is a great way of getting something done. So I think part of it is to obviously share the knowledge. Part of it is also to create some creative ideas between people. And the other is just to get stuff done and to get feedback. And I think that's our biggest constraint is time. So when you book off 2 days, you can get that done. You can have a prototype at the end of the 2 days. It is quite an intense environment, but if you do have that project, or you do want to do that minimum viable product, and you want an environment, we're hosting obviously some live sessions here with with COVID protocols, and hopefully everything would have calmed down. And then we also have the online piece of it. So that's just a little bit of a teaser of what's coming next year in the beginning of March. We've sent just a link if you want to go and have a look at that.
New year, new me.
That's it. The first part is the content is free, so we're happy to share that. I mean, content is all over. It's really the application which makes a difference.
So if anyone has any questions about anything that we covered today, feel free to ask us now. We're happy to answer. Or if you want to ask us in private, my email address is simon@gametochange.co.za. But we actually have a few more people that have been added to the avatar. Someone in the United Kingdom. I was about to say, only South Africa? No, there must be someone overseas. Hey, you have a background as well. I like that. Again, another layer of personalization where it's not only your avatar, but then also the background that represents you. It's kind of like, you know, Facebook, where you get to like customize your banner profile. I think people love that. Deirdre, did you put one up?
Yeah, I was so busy talking. I do have mine. So I need to yes, and you can also have a different look and feel. It's quite fun to play with this. And there's even a quote. I like that. I like that, Adriana.
And again, because imagine this, you start your learner journey and you have everyone submits an avatar. And like halfway through, you show everyone. So you show all the other learners who's on this journey with you. And that can be a very powerful thing, right? Because you feel then a part of this kind of collective state.
Right.
JFBK also does not look impressed.
Great, guys. So we wanted to keep this short to the point, give you as many tips. We've got the YouTube. We'll send through just the avatar and where you can find avatars, and also the Twine. It's a great tool. It's really great for mapping out branch scenarios. If you do want to know more about scenario, which is really, I found it's been one of the best approaches I've learned for learning / game-based learning design. We're hosting a whole lot of videos, and we're going to have a landing page on that with some tips. It's been really interesting to share that space with Christy and for her to share her blog space. So please feel free to also look out for that. Yeah. This is our closeout and our final webinar. And thank you for being part of our community this year and sharing the space with us. And we hope we gave you some ideas. And hopefully we'll be seeing you around in 2022.
Yeah, so from all of us at GTC Learning, thank you so much for attending this last webinar of the season. If you haven't, clicked on LinkedIn, follow us, because we will definitely be doing more of these in the new year. A couple of thoughts on maybe AR implementation. I don't want to say anything more about that. But yeah, have a fantastic festive season. And for those of you that are going away on a holiday, keep safe and have a wonderful time. Thank you so much.